Welcome back to Pokemon episode summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 313, Jump for Joy. The episode begins not with Ash and the gang, but at a Pokemon Center where Nurse Joy was in her room on her Pokemon Center that she operated that was located on a high cliff. She was busy researching different ways to treat Pokemon, along with filing some sort of medical files. Suddenly, she began to feel a small wind, and it rustled some papers on her desk, and she wondered how the wind was coming in, as she didn't remember leaving the window open, but she saw that the window was open, and this obviously confused her, so she simply just got up to close it, thinking that it should have already been closed, when suddenly she was stopped from closing the window as the winds picked up, and then a creature jumped through the window, shattering a bit of glass in the process as it jumps behind her, startling her as she looked behind her to see who the creature was, only to see that it was a large brown Pokemon with gleaming red eyes, and she screamed in complete fear at the sight of this Pokemon. Meanwhile, we finally get to Ash and the gang this episode, and they were currently on their way to Mauville City, cutting through the mountains to hopefully get there faster, although they were getting pretty tired from all the walking, and thankfully, they spotted the same Pokemon Center that Nurse Joy was at, and they went inside, hoping to rest for a while. Although, before Ash and the gang entered the Pokemon Center, Ash questioned why a Pokemon Center would be built so high up on the mountains, leading Brock to look around for the reason, and he eventually sees a forest nearby, where there was one very large tree that towered above all the others, stating that a Pokemon Center was probably built in the area, so that trainers could have a place to stop and look at all the beautiful trees nearby, including that huge one. May then butts in, explaining that she thought the forest was beautiful as well. Max was interested in the forest as well, but not for its beauty, but for its potentially rare Pokemon, hoping that Nurse Joy at the Pokemon Center would tell them all the rare Pokemon spots, assuming she would know them. And Max also tells Ash that he should probably get his Pokemon checked on and healed up while they were in the Pokemon Center. They shouldn't just stop there for pretty much no reason. Ash agreed and went into the center, although Brock was the first one in, because upon hearing Max mention Nurse Joy multiple times, he couldn't help himself, wanting to simp. So he went in first. As soon as Ash and the gang approached the front desk of the center, they were initially distracted by how luxurious and big the lobby was compared to a normal center. It even had a chandelier and stairs leading to an upper area. Brock was barely distracted by the layout of the center, though. He was still too enamored with Nurse Joy, as he introduced himself and called out for her, only to see that she wasn't at the front desk and didn't respond to his calls, leaving Ash to wonder where the fuck she could be, and also where the fuck everyone else was, because there was no other trainers in the center either. When suddenly, Pikachu smelled something and started to go up the stairs as Ash and the gang followed. Pikachu only seemed to hear something even louder, as his ears perked up even more. Pikachu then goes in the first room that they passed by, on the second floor, leading Ash, May, Brock, and Max to go in there as well, and as soon as they did, they were extremely fucking shocked. Because this was the room that Nurse Joy had been doing research on her computer in earlier, just only a few minutes ago, and all Ash and the gang saw was no Nurse Joy, simply just papers laying across the floor, being slightly blown by the breeze still coming from the still open window. All of this led Max to suspect that someone may have broken in and tried to capture Nurse Joy or some shit. Ash agreed, though he soon directed 100% of his attention to Pikachu, as he spotted that Pikachu had fallen unconscious while he wasn't looking somehow. Ash obviously thought something was up, so he went up to Pikachu and tries to wake Pikachu up, asking if it was alright. But before he could do this, Ash mysteriously fell asleep as well, very much confusing May, Max, and Brock, as May questioned what the fuck just happened. Ash and Pikachu were now both asleep. Meanwhile, Team Rocket wasn't hiding in some bushes this time. They were instead merely relaxing, not even spying, inside a tree, on the branches and leaves. Jessie was leaning against the tree trunk, stating how relaxing it was, leading Meowth and James to lean against the trunk as well, therefore agreeing with Jessie's statement. And James also compliments the slight breeze and the great sun. Just then, Team Rocket's relaxation was interrupted as the large brown Pokemon that had captured Nurse Joy, which was revealed to be a Shiftry, very quickly passed by Team Rocket while still holding Nurse Joy, and it passed by so fast that it created a large gust of wind that knocked the unsuspecting Team Rocket down to the ground, still in disbelief at the sudden wind that it picked up. When Team Rocket fell, they landed very hard in some bushes below the tree, and Jessie and James hold their heads in pain, although Meowth seemed to be relatively okay, as he looked up and was able to 100% confirm that the Pokemon carrying Nurse Joy was a Shiftry. Team Rocket then further observes the Shiftry, as they see it land on a branch with Nurse Joy, and also see that several Seedots had already hung themselves up on this branch. The Shiftry then calls out and jumps away from the branch, leaving Jessie and James to question what the fuck was up with Shiftry. Meowth didn't care about what the fuck was up with the Shiftry in any way, shape, or form, as he had gotten a new idea. They should capture the Shiftry and give it to Giovanni. Wow, what a new, original idea. However, Meowth began to add the details of why he wanted to give Shiftry to Giovanni, going into his typical boss fantasy mode, as he imagined Giovanni waking up during a hot summer day and having Shiftry fan him and cool him down. Adding that Giovanni could of course also use Shiftry to fan him, even when it wasn't a super hot day. It would just be practical all the time. And he also added that Giovanni would probably be so happy to get a Shiftry that he would give all of them promotions. Jessie and James were immensely excited by this, and they began to cheer for Meowth's idea, deciding to go through with it. And Wobbuffet popped out as well, showing that it agreed with Meowth, but Jessie simply told it to get the fuck back in its Pokeball, as she would call it. With Wobbuffet dealt with, Team Rocket set out to capture the Shiftry, per Jessie's orders, taking the lead. Meanwhile, back at the Pokemon Center, Brock had finally managed to wake Ash and Pikachu up. After some shaking. After waking up Ash and Pikachu, Brock decided to inspect Pikachu to see potentially why it had fallen asleep, only to find some blue powder on Pikachu's nose, and he was able to identify the powder shortly after discovering it as stun spore powder, which Pikachu most likely inhaled, and that obviously caused it to pass out. Knowing this, Brock declared that there must have been something or someone who left a stun spore potion, or just used the move stun spore, in the room. Meanwhile, May was searching the room, still looking for any signs of Nurse Joy, and went to Nurse Joy's computer, and she found out for a fact that it was Nurse Joy's when she found a document Nurse Joy was writing, relating to her research, particularly research of treatments that she could apply to Pokemon staying at her Pokemon Center. Upon hearing Nurse Joy's name, Brock couldn't help himself but get literally hard-eyed and go behind May, trying to see a potential picture of Nurse Joy on the computer. Fucking pervert. Anyways, while all this was going on, and Ash was just sitting down on the ground watching, Max noticed a security camera mounted on the wall over the door, and suggested that they could check out the security tapes to see what had went down and where Nurse Joy had went, coming to the conclusion that she was obviously captured or some shit. This was confirmed when Ash and the gang watched the tapes and saw that Nurse Joy was just sitting on her computer researching and then went to the window. A Shiftry had went into this room through the window, knocked out Nurse Joy using Stun Spore, and took her away, out the window. Max was initially the only one to recognize Shiftry as a Shiftry, and Ash had to look at his Pokedex to find out more about Shiftry, with the Pokedex telling him some actual super useful information for once, being that Shiftry were said to live in the tops of trees that were over 1,000 years old. Anyways, seeing the video footage made Brock enraged at the fact that Shiftry had captured Nurse Joy and swore to get her back. But Ash, Max, and Nate reminded Brock that they didn't even know where the Shiftry had taken Nurse Joy, because although Ash knew that Shiftry liked to live in tops of trees that were over 1,000 years old, he had no way of finding out which trees nearby were 1,000 years old. The gang begins to brainstorm, although Max wasn't much help, because he was too preoccupied with his disbelief that Shiftry could actually use Stun Spore, as he didn't know that before. Suddenly, Pikachu ended up being the one who was able to come up with a theory for where the Shiftry could have taken Nurse Joy, as it went over to the open window, calling the others over. So, they all looked out the window to see Pikachu pointing towards the large tree from earlier that stood above all the others. Ash knew what Pikachu was getting at. Since this tree was the biggest tree in the area, it had to be the oldest, so if a Shiftry was nearby, since they lived in the oldest trees that were around 1,000 years old, Ash came to the conclusion that Shiftry had to have been in the tree, and declared that Ash and gang should start their search for Nurse Joy there. Brock was excited for this, as he jumped up with fire in his eyes, and confirming the fact that he would lead Ash and the gang there, to save Nurse Joy. As Ash and the gang began their trek to the tree, Shiftry was going through the whole forest, with Nurse Joy still slung over its shoulder. Shiftry eventually crossed a lake, and went back into the forest after that, although some Nuzleaf began to follow it. Anyways, as for Ash and the gang, they were heading down the path from the Pokemon Center toward the tree as fast as they could, and soon they saw it in the distance, simply just leading Ash and the gang to run faster so they could reach it. Suddenly, though, right before Ash and the gang could reach the tree, a group of Oddishes then appeared and blocked the pathway, and then tried to use a Stun Spore to make Ash and the gang fall asleep. Thankfully, though, May sent out her Beautyfly just in time, being prepared for a Stun Spore because of what had happened to Nurse Joy, and thankfully, Beautyfly was able to blow away all the Stun Spore with a single gust attack. The Oddish were intimidated by Beautyfly, so they all left, allowing Ash and the gang to continue onwards to the tree. We then see a full exterior view of the huge tree, before seeing its interior filled with roots, which Shiftry had now returned to, with Nurse Joy still slung over his back. Anyways, back with Ash and the gang, right as they were about to enter the tree, they were then stopped by a number of red eyes poking out at them from the bushes, glaring at them angrily. May got frightened at this, having a whole bunch of fears as to what scary Pokemon could have been in the bushes, but it was actually just a group of Seedot in the bushes as they hopped out. May's nervousness, as well as anyone else's, instantly went away, not believing that Seedot could harm them, although this was proven wrong, as the group of Seedot then launched a barrage of bullet seeds at Ash and the gang, leading Ash and the gang to take cover from the bullet seeds behind some nearby bushes, Team Rocket style. Ash and the gang wondered why the Seedot were attacking them, as suddenly Oddish appeared as well. That group of Oddish from earlier, yeah, they were back, and they were standing in front of the tree to prevent Ash and the gang from going inside. Seeing this made Max realize that the Seedot were probably attacking Ash and the gang, because it was their way of protecting the tree. Brock agreed, although stated that, for Nurse Joy's sake, they had to find a way to get into the tree anyways. Though Max still had one question on his mind, being how Shiftry was able to use Stun Spore. He still hadn't figured that out, and this led Brock to state his assumption that the Oddish must have somehow lent Stun Spore to Shiftry to use on Nurse Joy, suggesting that maybe the Oddish gave the Shiftry a thing of powder that it could take with it. Meanwhile, for a brief look inside the tree, Shiftry had now placed Nurse Joy down on a slab of wood, and watched her. While back outside, Ash and the gang were still getting absolutely pelted by Seedot's bullet seeds, and were forced to take refuge behind some different bushes, as the Seedot had found their original bushes. May was freaking out, scared, although Ash calmed her down, trying to calm her screaming, and quieted, as he assured May that the Seedot wouldn't be an issue anymore, because Pikachu could take care of them, and he then ordered Pikachu to use Thunderbolt on the Seedot, but Max stopped him, reminding Ash that Seedot were grass types, so they weren't super hurt from electric attacks, and therefore Max suggested that May should actually be the one to battle and send out her Torchic against them.
since fire attacks like Torchic's Ember were super effective against the Sea Dot. Although May was scared, she really wanted to get revenge on these Sea Dot who were causing her distress, so she agreed to send out a Torchic and told it to use Ember
on not only the Seedot, but also the Oddish as well, scaring the Pokemon so much that the Seedot and Oddish all ran away, leaving May to congratulate her Torchic and hug it as it happily jumped into her arms. With the Seedot and Oddish taken care of, Ash and the gang could finally make their way into the tree. However, unbeknownst to Ash and the gang though, Team Rocket had been following closely behind this whole time as they emerged from the bushes. Some different bushes than the ones Ash and the gang were just in. Team Rocket had obviously noticed that Ash and the gang were after the Shiftry as well, leading Jessie to state that Team Rocket had to get into the tree before Ash and the gang did, with Jessie additionally stating that Ash and the gang would not cause them any trouble. She would make sure of it. So, with that, Team Rocket ran into the tree, hoping to get there first, although they ran so fast that they ended up leaving Wobbuffet trailing behind, since he was a lot slower. Meanwhile, back inside the tree, Shiftry continued to watch over Nurse Joy until she eventually began to stir and woke up to see Shiftry right in her face. Becoming frightened at the Shiftry, since she didn't know that the Shiftry had just been looking after her while she was not conscious. However, she then takes notice of the fact that Shiftry wasn't moving, even when she was backing away in fear. Anyways, back with Ash and the gang, they weren't able to get into the tree immediately, as before they could get there, they first had to cross the same lake that Shiftry had crossed, if you remember that. Basically, the Oddish weren't guarding the immediate entrance to the tree, they were just guarding the path to it. Anyways, Pikachu must have been able to smell Shiftry a little bit, as it went on the same rock that Shiftry had jumped on, and signaled that Shiftry had been on there. Hearing this, Brock was excited to know that they were finally close to Shiftry in the tree, and declared that he would teach Shiftry a lesson and get Nurse Joy back, releasing all of his pent-up anger towards Shiftry. Just then, Ash and the gang got startled as rocks began to suddenly explode, and several Nuzleaf emerged from behind the rocks. Basically, they were hiding behind them, and they had used their head leaves to destroy the rocks, and now they had revealed themselves and proceeded to launch bullet seeds at Ash and the gang to attack them, leaving Ash and the gang to try and run away, just as they had with the Seedot at the start. Although, even as they ran, Ash and the gang were getting pelted by bullet seeds. Meanwhile, even though Nurse Joy saw that Shiftry wasn't harming her, she thought that it was just an intimidation tactic, so she still tried to back away from Shiftry, and eventually she pivoted into a run, but she soon stopped as she looked down to see that she was obviously very high up in the tree, and since she was so high up, she couldn't jump down or anything like that. So, the only thing she could do was scream for help. Meanwhile, Ash and the gang were continuing to try and run away from the Nuzleaf, although to no avail, as the Nuzleaf simply continued to chase after them, firing more bullet seeds, leading Max to suggest that Ash used Halo, since grass types were weak against flying types, just like fire types, clarifying that Halo may have been the better choice now, since Torchic was probably tired out from its battle against the Seedot and Oddish. Hearing this advice from Max, Ash wastes no time sending out Halo, and he tells it to use Wing Attack on the Nuzleaf, which hits them hard, causing them to run off deep into the forest, making the way to the tree safe once again, as Ash thanked Halo for its efforts and recalled it. Max then questioned why the Nuzleaf, Oddish, and Seedot were waiting to ambush and attack them, leaving Brock to remind Max that they were probably working with Shiftry to stop them from reaching the tree where Nurse Joy was, meaning Brock had now 100% believed that Nurse Joy was inside the tree. Max then questioned Brock on why Shiftry had taken Nurse Joy to this tree in specific anyways, and also what it even needed Nurse Joy for, leading Brock to simply admit that even that shit was beyond him, only knowing that there was likely a lot of shit that they didn't know about Shiftry's motivations. Ash then suggested that if Max really wanted to know what was going on, then that's why Ash and the gang should just fucking stop talking and head to the tree, and they did, now running faster than ever. Meanwhile, as for Team Rocket, they were still following Ash and the gang, and Jessie was immensely pleased as she peeked her head out from over some rocks, seeing how Ash and the gang had basically been doing everything for them. What she meant by this was, Ash and the gang had been dealing with the Seedot, the Nuzleaf, the Oddish, all the potential obstacles, so Team Rocket would just be able to reap the benefits of this and go straight to the tree without having to worry about them. James agreed with what Jessie said, admitting that they didn't have to break a sweat, and Meowth commented that all they had to do was just let Ash and the gang take care of every Pokemon and follow them to Shiftry. The three of them then chant happily as Wobbuffet forcibly pops out of its Pokeball again, forcing Jessie to recall it. Meanwhile, back inside the tree, Joy panicked as seemingly no one had heard her screams, and her scream may have made Shiftry angry, as Shiftry was now finally taking a step towards her. Nurse Joy managed to finally build up the courage and asked why the Shiftry had even captured her in the first place, though, and what it wanted to do with her, but before Nurse Joy could get an answer, much to her surprise, all of the grass Pokemon that Ash and the gang had defeated, Seedot, Oddish, and Nuzleaf, all gathered inside of the tree, revealing that that's where they had all run off to. Nurse Joy wondered what they were all doing here, when suddenly the wind began to get stronger, confusing Nurse Joy, and Nurse Joy only gets more confused when it was revealed that all the grass Pokemon apparently used this wind as a signal as they began to separate, creating a trail. Basically, they were all in this gigantic mishmash, hodgepodge thing, but once the wind had picked up, they split to basically make a walkway. Just then, a Seedot walked down this walkway and approached Joy and motioned for her to follow it, calling out to her. Nurse Joy obliges, and follows the sea dot to the top of the tree, which was where she spotted why Shiftry had captured her. And that reason was because Nuzleaf was very, very, very sick, having a massive fever. In addition to being pretty unconscious, these last two things found out when Nurse Joy ran up to the sick Nuzleaf to examine it. Just then, Shiftry, along with several more Nuzleaf, Oddish, and Seedot approach, and Nurse Joy admits that she saw why now that the Shiftry had captured her, and said that she now viewed it as no big deal, and promised that she would do whatever she could to try and heal Nuzleaf. But they would have to trust her, of course. And Shiftry, not having any other options, nodded, insinuating that he would try his best to trust Nurse Joy. So yeah, basically, Shiftry wasn't capturing Nurse Joy with any malicious intent, it merely wanted to save a member of its family. Aww. Just then, though, another Nuzleaf, looking rather flustered, came up to Shiftry and all the other Pokemon that were there, and yelled something to Shiftry that Nurse Joy couldn't make out, but it clearly made Shiftry angry as it jumped out of the tree in rage, right as the winds picked up once more. Basically, the Nuzleaf had informed Shiftry that it had spotted enemies approaching, and Shiftry planned to defeat any enemies. And these enemies, yeah, they were of course Ash and the gang. Meanwhile, Ash and the gang were very close to the tree now, but Pikachu suddenly jumped in front of all of them and motioned for them to stop as it got into a battle stance, indicating that it sensed something, and what it sensed was an increase in the wind force, in turn signaling Shiftry, as Shiftry had managed to find Ash and the gang, and Ash and the gang realized that it looked extremely angry, not fully knowing why, even though we knew full well. Ash instantly demanded Shiftry to give Nurse Joy back, but Shiftry refused, so Ash knew that he was going to have to battle with Shiftry as he sent out his Trico and told it to begin with Quick Attack, but Shiftry was way too fast, and therefore Trico missed. Surprising Ash that Shiftry was faster than an attack literally called Quick Attack. Trico then notices that Shiftry had disappeared. However, he soon saw him on top of another tree, and Shiftry then shot a bullet seed down at Trico, but Trico was just barely able to dodge by backflipping away. Trico then goes in for a pound attack on Shiftry by jumping up into the tree it was in, but Shiftry simply bounced higher off of the tree, utilizing the strong wind gust, and the wind was so strong that when Trico was about to land the pound on Shiftry, it ended up being blown away by the force of the wind first. So Trico landed on the ground, and Shiftry jumps down as well, looking to finish off Trico, as the two Pokemon stared each other down. Knowing that the fight could take a while, Ash told Brock, May, Max, and Pikachu to go onwards to the tree without him, stating that he and Trico would keep Shiftry busy, so it couldn't do anything. So, Brock, May, Max, and Pikachu obliged. Unfortunately, Max, May, and Brock still had an obstacle to deal with, as they were ambushed by some more Nuzleaf that jumped out of the tree, although the Nuzleaf were quickly distracted and dealt with Pikachu's Thunderbolt. Anyways, Trico and Shiftry continued to battle, with Trico using a Quick Attack, but missing and tripping, and Shiftry using a Bullet Seed, but missing. Shiftry then managed to get off one Bullet Seed, and Trico managed to get off one Quick Attack, and they then both went in to repeat these attacks, crashing into each other, and they fall back, now breathing extremely heavily, indicating that they were tired as fuck, and they could barely stand at this point. Just then, though, none other than Team Rocket appeared, laughing, stating their motto, and were about to explain their plan, but Meowth and Wobbuffet cut in the motto early, desperate to talk, since Meowth really wanted to be the one to explain the plan, and Wobbuffet just wanted to be its annoying self, making Jessie and James mad as they proceeded to beat them up and try and throw them away, wanting to do the motto as usual. They eventually managed to finish their motto while beating up Meowth and Wobbuffet, and then Jessie and James revealed their plan finally, demanding that Ash give Shiftry, stating that they were going to take Shiftry whether Ash liked it or not. Ash refused, but Team Rocket didn't care in the slightest. Meanwhile, back with Brock, May, Max, and Pikachu, they were continuing to head for the tree, and they finally reached the bottom, starting to climb it. And the first thing that Brock, May, and Max see when they go inside the tree was Nurse Joy treating the very sick Nuzleaf as best she could, as she placed a wet towel on the Nuzleaf's forehead, while all the Seedot, Nuzleaf, and Oddish eagerly watched her. Although May, Brock, and Max were soon spotted by Nurse Joy and all the Nuzleaf, Oddish, and Seedot, and the Nuzleaf, Oddish, and Seedot angrily crowded around Brock, May, and Max, not wanting them to potentially take Nurse Joy or harm the injured Nuzleaf and the injured and sick Nuzleaf even more. Seeing all the Pokemon angry around Brock, May, and Max, Nurse Joy questioned if they were bad people and who they were, leading Brock to clarify that he had actually come to rescue her, introducing himself. Although, much to Brock's confusion, Nurse Joy interrupts Brock as he was introducing himself, saying that she didn't need rescuing. However, Brock's confusion was then gone as he took a closer look at the very sick Nuzleaf, and therefore he, along with May and Max, came to the conclusion that Shiftry must have just taken Nurse Joy so that Nurse Joy could have helped the Nuzleaf. May then panicked, realizing that Ash was fighting Shiftry, even though it had no ill intentions. And upon hearing this, Nurse Joy became worried because Shiftry was needed by her to help with Nuzleaf. Brock, Max, and May were confused by this, leading Nurse Joy to explain that the Nuzleaf was very sick and needed a special treatment from a Pokemon Center, along with some water to help its fever. And the only way that she could get some water and some treatment supplies was by going back to the Pokemon Center, but that would mean that Shiftry would likely want to come back into the tree and watch over Nuzleaf while she was gone. So she knew that Ash would have to stop fighting Shiftry so that he could do this. So Nurse Joy asked Brock, May, or Max to accompany her to the Pokemon Center and also help end the battle between Ash and Shiftry, so that Shiftry could watch over Nuzleaf, and Brock, May, and Max agreed. Meanwhile, back outside the tree, Shiftry was very angry at Team Rocket for threatening to steal it, so it angrily glared at them, deciding that it was going to take out Team Rocket before Ash. Team Rocket saw this angry glare, and they began to worry as they were sent blasting off with Shiftry, utilizing a gust of wind in nature to create a whirlwind attack, and send Team Rocket blasting off as Wobbuffet holds the rose from Jessie's part of the motto in its mouth and claps, having taken the rose from Jessie, which pissed her off as she tried to recall Wobbuffet while they were still blasting off. Shiftry then set its sights back on Trico as it tried to use another whirlwind on it, but Trico dodged by jumping up, although Shiftry jumped up in the air as well and managed to hit Trico with a bullet seed, smashing it hard into the ground and almost knocking it out. Ash quickly ran up to Trico to make sure it was alright, although just then Brock and Nurse Joy appeared, having left May and Max behind to watch over the Nuzleaf before they could get Shiftry. And Nurse Joy then tells the Shiftry that there was no need to fight Ash and Trico, stating that they were good people, just like their friends, May and Max, who she revealed were currently watching over the sick Nuzleaf as best they could, though added that Shiftry should stop fighting to join them in watching over the Nuzleaf. Stating her belief that Shiftry would likely want to watch over the Nuzleaf itself if Nurse Joy wasn't there, as she further explained that although she would come back, she had to go to the Pokemon Center to go get some good medicine and water for the Nuzleaf, specifically stating that she needed water to help Nuzleaf's fever on its leaf. Ash was confused by what the fuck was going on, obviously, so Brock got him up to speed, explaining that Nurse Joy was brought to the tree by Shiftry only to take care of a Nuzleaf who got sick. Ash, now being caught up to speed, commented on how he had doubts that Nurse Joy would be able to make it to the Pokemon Center before Nuzleaf got worse, since the Pokemon Center was so far away. But Brock then had an idea, as he asked Shiftry if he could ride it, and if Shiftry could take him back to the Pokemon Center, and Shiftry, desperate to do anything to save the Nuzleaf, agreed. Although scared Brock, as he grabbed him without warning by running up to him, making Brock scream, as Shiftry zoomed off into the forest towards the Pokemon Center with incredible speed, with Brock only screaming louder and struggling to hold on to Shiftry the faster it went. Thankfully, though, Shiftry was soon able to make it back to the Pokemon Center, and Brock, knowing what Nurse Joy needed, was able to grab the correct supplies and the water, and gave it to Nurse Joy upon coming back. And Nurse Joy wiped the Nuzleaf's leaf with water, and then administered her treatment, and Ash and the gang, Nurse Joy, Shiftry, all the Nuzleaf, all the Seedot, and all the Oddish waited for hours in anticipation, and soon enough, Nuzleaf woke up, and Nurse Joy happily exclaimed that Nuzleaf was all healed, making all the Pokemon cheer immensely, along with Ash and the gang and Nurse Joy, and the Pokemon all hoist Nuzleaf up in joy, as Nuzleaf smiles, happy that everyone cared about it so much. Shiftry nodded to thank Nurse Joy for her help, and was clearly impressed with Nurse Joy's healing efforts, as he agreed to have Nurse Joy essentially be a second caretaker of the Nuzleaf, Oddish, and Seedot. He would basically be their guardian, but Nurse Joy would do most of the work. So the Shiftry leaves, promising to watch over the Oddish, Seedot, and Nuzleaf from the forest, and Ash and the gang escorted Nurse Joy and the Nuzleaf, the Seedot, and Oddish back to the Pokemon Center, as Nurse Joy thanked Ash and the gang for all of their help, as did the Nuzleaf, Oddish, and Seedot. With everything taken care of, it was now time for Ash and the gang to continue on their journey to Mauville City. So Brock told Nurse Joy not to forget him, leading Ash to joke that there was no way Nurse Joy could forget Brock because of his girly scream when he rode Shiftry away. Brock was embarrassed, so he quickly waved goodbye to Nurse Joy, as well as the Nuzleaf, Oddish, and Seedot, and left, followed by Ash and May and Max. The episode then ends with Nurse Joy spotting the Shiftry, who had returned to the huge tree, and just as it promised, it was watching over all the grass Pokemon from atop the tree. Upon seeing how much Shiftry cared about all the other grass Pokemon, Nurse Joy smiled, and Ash and the gang continued on to Mauville City.